Thanks. So much more to do about trauma-informed theology, and you are leading the way on that, and you and Tom really. Elaine, I was struck by your reference to going to Oklahoma and learning from tribal leaders there. And you mentioned David Wilson. I met this pastor, David Wilson, who Rob and I know. Rob might want to ask a question. Rob Duncan is president of Northwind and has lived in Oklahoma and knows the tribal leaders there and the ones you're talking about. Rob, are you able to, if you're hearing me, can you ask a question?
I appreciated you mentioning David Wilson. I had the honor of giving him an honorary degree at Bacone College. Oh, wow. And David was a wonderful partner. He partnered with Michael and I when we did the Native American Spirituality Conferences at Bacone, and another one with me when I was helping Dwight Mission. And we were really trying to match up that dichotomy of Christian versus tribal spirituality. And the one event, I sat at lunch with two presenters. They were brothers. One was a Southern Baptist pastor and one was a traditional spiritualist who announced he was a medicine man. And they had not spoken in 5 years. And they had both presented their view of spirituality. And it was a healing moment because they talked with each other at lunch. So it is, I wanted to say it is possible. Another really moving time was when we had Chief Joseph Medicine Crow, the last Crow war chief. He had stolen horses from German officers in World War II, and that's one of the steps to becoming a war chief. And he asked all of our graduates to stand and turn, and he sang them an honor song. And his voice was very weak until he sang his song and filled the entire Civic Center and then became weak again. And when the tribal colleges couldn't get accreditation, we extended our accreditation to them from Bacone. And to me, all of those things were issues, a matter of social or church justice, that the reason we were doing those things. And it ended up with an NAACP student chapter that was 50% African American and 50% Native American, and the only one in a private college in Oklahoma. And most of them were church institutions. And your uphill battle you described, the presidents of the other colleges asked me, why would I want to bring that trouble to my campus, even though they were church affiliated institutions? Yeah. So I want you to know that there are a lot of different ways that that's been kind of percolating along, but I wanted to echo with you how difficult it is in the institutional settings that are trying to maintain status quo. You really touched me in that part of the lecture, so thank you.
Thank you, Rob. I really appreciate that. Appreciate your work too.
It's been my experience, oftentimes feeling like I'm on the outside looking into whatever group it happens to be that I'm near. But I also have experienced that everybody feels that way, including what we want to call the dominant white male culture. So even white males, it has been my experience, have that same sense of not really feeling like they belong. So what I'm wondering is, how do we go about engendering that sense of real belonging in people and get past this, everybody else belongs, but I don't, I'm on the outside looking in?
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Alice. That's a good question. The feeling of not belonging is at the root of toxic shame. And the degree to which people feel that way has everything to do with experiences of trauma and with experiences of being marginalized structurally by the way our society works. So right now, one of the reasons many white men feel marginalized and not belonging is because of the justice movements that are like the Me Too movement, for example, and Black Lives Matter. From a standpoint of what's the right phrase? This is a sociological reality and a psychological reality. When people who've had privileged status in a culture, in an organization, in a society, when they've had privileged status, such as white privilege, white male privilege, And then the society starts to shift, and other people are going to now have power too, so that there's more of an equitable sharing of power. It's perceived, it's emotionally felt by those who used to be the ones in power, like exclusively in power, as if they're being discriminated against, and they're being harmed, when actually what's happening is now we're going to share power, but it doesn't feel good like sharing for some people. So that's part of what's going on. It's not all of what's going on. The way that we heal the wounds of deep conviction that we don't belong is through practices of genuine community on a small scale. This always has to be small. This is why I try to focus so much on developing small faith communities, neighborhood sized communities, because that's where we get to know each other and do life together. And that's where we learn how to have each other's backs. Forming communities like that, fostering them, is one of the chief ways to heal the trauma that lodges in us from war, from uh, being a part of a marginalized community of people, from domestic violence, from sexual abuse. Belonging to a small community like that, where we know and we are known, people have our backs and we learn to have their backs, doing life together. That doesn't mean we all have to live together, but it's that formation and experience of genuine community that heals that wound, because now you belong. And if you've had deep wounds, it will take a while to trust in that new space where you belong. You have to live into it.
Thank you.
Yeah. Last chance to ask a question if anyone wants to. I'm going to close here in just a moment, but if you have one, you can raise your hand or you can chat. Well, yeah, Gail, let me ask Gail. You're in the community development program here at Northwind. What's your question?
Based on the idea of small groups to heal lasting trauma, small communities, would your opinion be that it would be better for those small communities to be of like people, or more integrated into a community of people that don't necessarily have that same trauma? I've read things promoting different ideas of that. Do you have an opinion on that?
Yeah, I think it depends on the situation.
Yeah.
So, for example, one of the reasons AA is so powerful for so many people, the 12-step spirituality is, people are gathered together and they're all in a circle and they're all going to say, hi, I'm Elaine, I'm an alcoholic, or I'm Elaine and I'm addicted to work. I'm Elaine and, I'm addicted to getting people to like me, or what, you know what I'm saying? So that's
Right, that's true.
Yeah, so that's and early Methodism, by the way, the class meetings and band meetings, the accountability structures where you would show up and nobody got a pass. Everybody would have to say what sin they'd been struggling with, and how they'd encountered God in the scriptures, and what they had actually done practically to help people that are suffering since the last time we got together. So in many ways, early Methodism in these class meetings was kind of like AA for sinners or something, you know what I'm saying? So, part of our dilemma, let's say, I remember, I think it was Don McGavran that talked a lot about affinity groups. You should plant churches where you have an affinity group. So if you're a middle class suburban white woman, you should create a faith community with white women who live in the middle class suburbs, and it's the easiest to form community. I don't agree with that, but I understand why he said that. It's really, really hard to form a small group that's truly multicultural. We're not good at that because we're used to having a white masculinist dominant society here in the US and in many parts of the world. So actually learning cultural humility and some of the things we have to learn in order to form a small faith community that's truly multicultural, has multiple economic representations there and different levels of education, this sort of thing. It takes a lot of intentionality. I do believe that that's actually where we're going, what God's calling us toward in this rapidly changing world, that's globalized, and with these movements like Me Too and the Black Lives Matter movement, and other movements toward justice, and people having a voice and participating fully and experiencing equity.
Well, I'm going to have to draw this to a close because our time is over. But if you would like to continue learning from Elaine Heath, I would like to invite you to take one of her courses. She'll be teaching a course on New Reformation and renewal in the church at Northwind. And I'm very, she's a United Methodist. We've known each other as Methodist colleagues for a long time, and several of us are who founded Northwind United Methodists in our roots, but we are an ecumenical and a very wide tent, big tent, ecumenical seminary. And there's room for everyone to belong who are willing to respect the other. So Elaine will be teaching for us. And I'm very happy to announce today, for the very first time anywhere, that Dr. Elaine Heath has agreed and has accepted our invitation to join the faculty of Northwind as visiting professor of Wesleyan Studies. Will you join me and just clap for her and thank her for this lecture and for joining Northwind? Thank you, Elaine. Last word is yours. Do you want to say something before we leave?
I just really appreciate the opportunity, and being a pioneering person myself, I deeply appreciate the courage and risk-taking pioneering endeavor of Northwind Seminary. So I wish the school the very best. I see several friends that have said hi in the chat box, and I've been trying to pay attention. So great to see all of you. And thank you again for the invitation to offer this first lecture. Really appreciate it.
All right, everybody. We'll see you online. Please email me or chat for any questions you have. I'd like to see you, Karen. I'm glad you joined us from the Henry Nouwen Society. Love it that you're here. We're overlapping and doing some things together. But thank you all, students and friends of Northwind. Bless you all, and we'll see you online.